Hey everyone, let's welcome to the show retired Colonel PJ Dermer, who's a 30-year Army veteran and the founder of TERRA Search Promise, the nation's first veteran-owned nonprofit that organizes global field recoveries to bring home our missing in action. Thanks for joining, sir. I appreciate you coming.
Good evening. Yeah, appreciate talking to you, Danny. Thanks for hanging in there.
Sure. Could you tell me a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, it is. It is kind of it's a neat thing, but it's not. It is a bit of a niche business, but an important business. We are in the profession of finding our missing in action from the nation's wars. So there is a register in the United States of our soldiers, comrades, colleagues that did not come home from a deployment in support of our nation. It has to be an actively commissioned conflict. There are a lot of small conflicts around the world and hazardous duty events, but these are what we do is for the major conflicts that our nation has endured. Unfortunately, too many of our brothers didn't come home. So it's on and off since World War II mainly. We don't do World War I, it's World War II forward. Since World War II, right immediately after conflicts, the government has sent out teams to investigate certain battle sites to make sure they could give a full accounting to our missing. Because in the battles back in the day, fortunately not so much in present terms, they were very large, very, very violent, very far away. And the nation could not account for all of its fallen. So they had teams that would go out. And over time and over the years, it would ebb and flow about how much interest there was, how much effort there was. That's a different story for another time. But all in total, the commission from our nation to never forget, to bring all of our to account, not to necessarily find, but to account for the status of anyone missing from the wars, World War II forward, is close to 80,000. That's a large number, but if you go back on our history, given the battles that were fought, World War II, Korea, these are very large conflicts. Fortunately, we haven't seen many in the modern era, Ukraine probably being one of the exceptions. So it has been under the purview of the United States government to conduct this activity. Of late, over the last decade, plus or minus, the government decided, after some reorganization and some investigations, the United States government, the Department of Defense, decided to bring in help from the outside, primarily private help, universities, field schools. There are a couple of corporate entities out there to assist in increasing the number of missions because of the large number that are missing and the unfortunate truth that we might not get there one way or the other. So let's do the best we can while we can. We are part of that program, of a partnership program that the Department of Defense has, run through the Office of DPAA, Defense Partnership, MIA, and Accounting Agency, plus or minus a letter in the acronym, headquartered in Hawaii, or with a lab in Hawaii, headquartered in Crystal City, Virginia. We are part of their program as a partner effort to work with the Department of Defense. We are the first veteran outfit in the nation to do this as a full scope, as a full focus. We're not interested in mission creep. We're not interested in other veteran issues. For us, we're interested in the issues where it's not part of our program. We want to concentrate on MIA recoveries, period. And there are other veterans in the business or in the practicum, but it's part of something else that they're a whole of, like wellness, behavioral assistance, you name it, a whole plethora of different veteran organizations today. And they have a program of maybe in part of that, of their greater whole, that they do recoveries, or they're partnered with the university or partnered with someone else. We are veterans, soul focused by us. We want to be in this space in a big way, and this is what we want to do. So we recruited along those lines, advertised along those lines. I bumped into it as a retiree a few years back, traveling, doing some military historical travel. I bumped into a small NGO that was doing this out on the Central Pacific. I joined them, cut my teeth on them, loved it, and said, gee, we can do this bigger and better. And I started research over during the COVID timeframe. And it became TERRA Search Promise once we became a nonprofit.
And could you guide me through more specifics on how you do this? How do you recover
Right,
MIAs?
you bet. So essentially, the Department of Defense, as I noted, has the executive authority to account for all of our missing in action, missing in the wars. They have stacks of historical folders, historical information, documentation. They have a process where they decide who they want to actually physically look for. There's other kinds of accounting. There's grave disinterments. There's reporting, other ways, other things that they do as well that we don't do. But the field recovery, which is what we're interested in, they put together a program and a schedule, and they reach out to partners to say, okay, on this area of the world at this time, we have this case. Would you be interested in taking it to the field or acting on it in the field? And we have to negotiate over, we have to do pricing, we have to do timings, we have to do, operational assessments and stuff like that. So the DoD gives us a holler. We get back to them, and then we contract a field recovery mission in the area that they ask us to. And to do that, the primary key actor that we need is a senior archaeologist, senior experienced field archaeologist or anthropologist. Archaeology is a niche business, forensic archaeology, forensic discovery, much like we are known for some of the shows, CSI and whatnot, is a further part of that world, forensic archaeology, forensic discovery. We are more into that vein because we have to provide evidence or find the evidence in order for the Department of Defense experts in the laboratory and elsewhere to take the evidence and make a determination whether, excuse me, this is in fact the person we claim to be looking for. It's a very strict process. We participate in that in the field. So we send them what we find in the field, registered, documented, hand carried, or chain of custody back to the United States. Mm-hmm. So the key factor being a senior archaeologist, and then we build a team of veteran supporters, and family members around them, which is a labor pool. And by now we have a pretty big labor pool. It doesn't take a lot of expertise in the basic field. The senior archaeologist and deputy archaeologist run the site, and we move dirt, we clear, we set up systems, whatever allows us to get to the evidence. We always take a medic. That's not a standard, but we always take a medic, being military. Sometimes we need explosive ordnance disposal expertise, EOD as we call it. We need that. We recruit that. It's nice to have a great logistics person or two, expert or professional. MacGyver types are always welcome. Those that can work with their hands and make things up. And then we have plain labor. I arrange and I admin, but then I do a lot of labor. We move dirt. We move a lot of dirt. One way or the other, we have to move a lot of dirt in order to get to find what we want to find.
And this probably also requires a lot of collaboration with the foreign country you operate on. And I think this is part of what DoD is responsible for.
Partly, DoD makes the initial entry, but sometimes they can sublet more of the engagement to us or less to us. One of the beauties of a veteran organization is we have tremendous amount of experience in working overseas with foreign counterparts, number one. We also have very senior expertise. So because we have access to the veteran community, we all come from professional jobs, professional skills prior to even enlisting into this business. The archaeological world normally tends to, students take archaeology, they go to the field as field schools, and they work in the archaeological system. We come from all professions into this business, and some of us have been quite senior. Like I used to work in the White House when I was in the military, and I worked in our senior military staff when I was in the military in the Pentagon, which advises the president. So we have that capacity built within to talk at any level to a foreign country. But important point that you note, without local support, local help, local concurrence, it doesn't happen. Simply doesn't happen. It'd be silly to even attempt to go somewhere around the world, even to a friendly country, Germany, France, let's say Spain, and not be tied at the hip to the local supporters. Sometimes it's quite a bureaucratic plate, but that's their business, and that's what we have to work through. In other words, multiple levels, multiple offices.
This is what I wanted to explore more. You mentioned there were quite a few conflicts since World War II, to name a few: Vietnam, Korea, Afghanistan, Iraq. What about places that are essentially unfriendly countries to the US? I don't know about Vietnam because from one hand, it's a communist country, but it's kind of like in the middle. You have Korea, you have North Korea, where you definitely don't have access to. So how do you navigate those boundaries?
Well, that's first and foremost the DoD's responsibility. If they can't navigate it, we by no means would likely have a chance. Although We can also do private missions, those not sponsored by the DoD, but the DoD would have to at least be aware of it in a country that is agnostic to the U.S. But the short answer to your question is we don't. The last Korean exchange was when the President Trump in his first term was negotiating with the head of North Korea, and as a confidence builder, the North Koreans handed over a lot of remains to the U.S. We have not been in there on a formal basis in many years, like for an actual team on the ground. So it's very tricky. I mean, it's up to the Department of Defense. Vietnam is actually doing very well. It's opened up quite a bit to the United States over the last few years. We have not been there. We would like to get there. We have Vietnam vets in our team. We are of the cloth. It's a tricky environment, the jungle. The jungle takes a lot back, most of it back. It's not the easiest place to work and or find, but the Department of Defense has the primary responsibility to say, yes, we have an opening in X country. We would like you to do this mission. But it does impart upon us to be adults and grown-ups. You can't go busting in. You can't run into a country and say, hey, we were here. We fought. I'm looking for my brother. That's all that really needs to be said. That's not true. I mean, if it was yesterday, one might say perhaps, or last year perhaps, but most of the missions we're on are 50, 60, 70 years old. You're dealing with third party, third generation, fourth generation, your generation. You don't see it the same way and emotionally we did at the time. One of the things that I've had to deal with in a neat way and a hard way emotionally is some of our vets and others, our civilian assist partners, also would like to stay until the end. We can find every single piece of the brother we can find. Philosophically, we all agree, no one disagrees. But since it's going on 60, 70, 80 years later, that's one, tricky to do. Two, the tolerance a lot of times for the host nation you're at doesn't want you to stay forever. They gave you an opening to look. So look, they didn't invite you to live there and dig for the rest of your life. Plus, economically they can't. Maybe it's a farmland. I've done a horse paddock a few years back where the local owner said, yes, you may dig here, but this is it. We're building a horse paddock here and riding area. And once we build it, that's it. I won't let you back to dig. So, they have this is their world, their land. So we key on finding key crucial points of evidence enough to get an identification. Can be a little cold, some might say, but given the length of time and the circumstances that we're presented with, it's about the best we can hope for. And let's be honest, there's a cost, right? You can't stay out there forever due to costs. You can't have large teams rowing everywhere. You need to work within an economic budget in order to do your business, which presents another challenge.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned, I think you mentioned it's a nonprofit, right? So could you walk me through your business model? I think I understand how government is your biggest and probably the only, yeah.
Our prime contractor would be the Department of Defense. Yeah.
But you're still a nonprofit. So just to better understand the business model behind it, if you can walk me through.
Sure. I mean, I started as an LLC, limited liability corporation, right? Because it doesn't take very long. It's simple. You can do it on the internet by yourself. You need some professional help setting up some things, accounting and budget, some things like that. But essentially LLC and you're done because there's no money to be made really in our business. I don't take salary. I'm not in it for the money. One, I'm too old. Two, I'm too beat up. Three, it's a passion for me. And that's actually number one. It's passion. So I did it in order to have an entity where I can contract out. And of course, the contractor was going to be the Department of Defense. Well, as I went around the greater veteran community, I kept getting asked, are you a nonprofit? Are you a nonprofit? Why aren't you a nonprofit? Why do I need to be? My goal is to find our brother, get a fair price, get paid for our effort. And that's it. I mean, there's nothing else. There's no other agenda. But the culture of the veteran community and those donating and working with veterans, they'd like to see the nonprofit title and status. It really doesn't have any bearing on the Department of Defense side of it so far, but it does allow me to seek and get interest in funding so we can do other things like outreach and have one or two professionals kept at arm's length at any time we can reach. So it's whether you're LLC or nonprofit and you're partnered with the Department of Defense accounting agency, Doesn't really matter because a lot of the schools are nonprofit. A lot of the other universities have nonprofit status. To them, it's very contracting. Between us, it's a contract basis. How long, how many, here's the price. Can you do it within this price? Yes or no? And of course, nonprofit, there's no, we don't make any fun. I don't have any funding except for TERRA Search Promise. Okay. Of course, you can get, we bring on salaried people, 1099 independents for now. We pay our bills, we seek, but the business TerraSearch Promise is not in it to make a profit for any particular reason. Our ultimate goal is we take any overhead remaining, which is usually not very much, and turn it back into TerraSearch in order for us to get our name out like this. Mm-hmm. And I said, I don't take a salary. Whatever salary I get for labor or service, I put it right back into TerraSearch.
And you shared a little bit of a story behind how you came to the decision to start this company, this organization. Could you expand a little bit more on motivation behind it and
Sure.
because you said it's your passion, but it's interesting to learn that story.
Yeah, it's fair. That's a good question. It became a passion because I honestly didn't know about it, like many, 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 many other veterans, and Americans, which is why I'm happy to talk to you. So I was living overseas in Asia, and I wasn't employed professionally. I was once I retired from the military, I mostly did contracting, per work contracting, and most of that, based upon my credentials and based upon my expertise, was centered around the national security arena system, which is Washington, D.C. and a major capital or two, right? So living in Asia was a bit too far to do that, commute. So I said, well, since I'm over here in Asia, why don't I travel? Why don't I see and learn? And a particular interest was military historical travel. I was already an adjunct tour guide for veteran military historical travel in Virginia and had done some trips for them. So I said, why don't I pick up on that and I'll try and get a few more tours? Well, I happened to be in a place called Tarawa, Baishio. Republic of Kiribati is the name of the major chain in the Central Pacific, the island of Tarawa. Tarawa was very famous for its landing in 1944, and several movies were made about it in the good old days of John Wayne and whatnot. And it was one heck of a really, really, really bad battle. Yet another invasion beach that the Americans, if you know the history of World War II, essentially in the Pacific was island hopping up island chains en route to Tokyo. Tarawa was one of those. Marine Special Forces, they were called Raiders at the time. Marine Raiders, they are today, had a bit of a mission out there in 42. So this was a particularly nasty battle. Why? Mainly because it's hot jungle, 90 some degrees, 24 hours a day. And the Japanese put up a very tough fight. If you go to the Marine Museum in Quantico, it's memorialized as soon as you walk in the door. There's a nice little scene. So I was out there traveling. I found out that not very few people ever traveled out there. Mostly the people on the island are a few diplomats, missionaries, and aid people. So we had airline trouble, and while I was standing in line to talk to the desk at the airline desk, I mean, it was it's a wooden stool in the middle of of a hangar. I bumped into somebody, and they asked me, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm touring, World War II touring." And they go, "Cool, no one does that, but okay, have fun." And they introduced me to someone, a local that was looking to make a buck or two, and she took me around for the day. We had to go to the local store and buy clothing because we had nothing. The airlines did not bring our luggage is what the issue was. And the flights were only in there a couple of days a week. So we're kind of stuck for a few days. And as we're touring around, she mentioned to me, hey, there's this New Zealand gal that's out here looking for Army soldiers, Army people. And she's found a couple. I said, what do you mean? She said, yeah. She's a young gal from New Zealand, and she's an archaeologist, and she's digging up American soldiers. I'm like, sounds strange. She asked me if I'd like to meet her after we're done. I said, sure. I mean, what else? There's not a lot to do in Baishio anyway. I said, sure, bring her on. So we get back to the hotel and clean up, and she comes back to get me, and she takes me to the room. She happened to be staying at the same small hotel I was staying at. It wasn't Kiwi, it was an American. It was an archaeologist working for an NGO. The NGO was History Flight, and she took me into her anteroom. So she had a bedroom and like a little living room. She had one of the larger rooms, and there was an elderly gentleman there too, and he was a retired forensic archaeologist from Georgia. very nice guy. And they said, yeah, hey, this is who we are. Would you like to see what we've done? I said, sure. I said, you're digging up soldiers? They said, no, no, no. We're not digging up. We're archaeologists and we're looking for missing in action, MIAs. I said, oh, heard about it. I mean, I know about it, of course, for being in the service. I know the iconic flag. They took me into their room, which is air conditioned, which is one of the reasons they were in there. And there lay on the stretcher were two skeletons, almost full, which is incredibly rare in our job, in our world. One very big guy, 6 foot something, and another smaller thing. They were Marines, and they were from the invasion in 1944, and they were the first two among multiple that they would eventually find. And this was also a place where the Department of Defense had told them, it's not worth digging. There's nothing there. Don't waste your time. We're not going to back it. We're not going to support it. Forget it. We're not into it. You dig at your heart's content. And they did. The owner of this had great faith, and bingo, they had found two and were looking for more. So I asked her, how does one get into this business? I mean, of all the things you would think you would bump into and traveling around the Pacific, you're looking for tanks and bombers and planes and artifacts and stories and bullet riddled things and, things that are blown up and signs in multiple languages. I didn't expect this. And she said to me, come with us. We're a private NGO. Join us. We'd love to have you. So she sent a note back to, the owner, the head of the history flight. And I cut my teeth on them for about 4 or 5 years. I did not get to dig on Tarawa. I went back multiple times as more of a senior interlocutor. I wish I'd have gotten to dig, but I dug all throughout Europe and was in and out from Tarawa for a bunch of times, just doing other stuff for them. So I was hooked. I said, what a great, one, since I'm in Asia, this will give me something to do. And two, what a great thing to do, period. I mean, who would, unless you're into making millions of dollars and, being whatever, what a great thing for the, number one, the spirit and the soul. You can't feel better when you do something. You just can't. Weddings, yes, marriages, happy days, but this is something that takes you to a whole nother level. Number one. Number two is, for someone that's always been very operationally oriented, which is me, I like to do, to touch, to see, to feel. I have very senior time. Like I said, I was in the White House and national levels, but I always like being out. I like to make things happen. I really want to make it happen because that's our Achilles heel in a lot of ways. That's where we don't have a lot of depth. What better than making it happen to find someone after all these years, right? And you didn't need a whole lot, as I noted, you didn't need a whole lot of starting expertise if you're going to do what I was doing or interlocute or labor. It's basically, digging, carrying, planning. The scientific stuff belongs to the archaeologist or two that really they really are the center, the drivers of these missions, and they're great people. So I said, heck yeah. And then COVID hit, right? COVID hit, everyone's down. And I got a call from a couple people that veterans that know the mission, that knew the mission, that had been in and out of the government side of this thing. And they said, hey, yeah, I see what you're doing. Why don't you start your own outfit? I said, I kind of like being told what to do, kind of like just showing up and getting into it. Not a whole lot of responsibility. I had my roles. I had my things I was responsible. I was, admin lead. I was site assistant lead, making sure it worked and everything was there. Did 2 winter digs, which is something I would not, wish on anybody. The digging in the winter is really tricky. But I thought about it. It was COVID, we're sitting around and bingo. I said, okay, I'll start my own. Here I go. What was I thinking? And of course, what happens when you run and manage something, you immediately have to be up here at all the, headache stuff. And really all I wanted to do was just be shoveling in the screens, shaking the screen back and forth, trying to find the guy. And here we are. X years later, trying to ramp up. We'd like to do way more than we're doing. We'd like to be way more active. And that's where we are.
Appreciate you sharing this story. And for the final message that you can give to the listeners, what would you say?
Well, there's a sales part, like anything else where we need support. The purpose of TerraSearch is couple-fold. First off, for the veteran community to know that someone's out there doing it. Yes, the government's doing it from a bureaucratic perspective, and they have teams in the field. That's what they're chartered to do. Like I said, it's been up and down over our history. Right now, it's in an upside, as up as it can be. Two, by getting the veteran community at large involved, then maybe we can kick up the number of recoveries because it's a slow process. It's a bureaucratic process. And when you get the veteran community involved, think of the numbers. Oh my God, think of the numbers, right? And then thirdly, this is not a guaranteed issue. It's not a well-known big picture. Everyone's read into it issue. MIA recoveries. So by bridging and by bringing in next generations, I mean, the last thing you want is a whole bunch of guys and gals like me, right? Our generation. You need your generation, and in between, which we did have last year when we went out in Europe, to keep it going. If we bring in the next generations, we bring the gap, we bring the crossover, then they know that this is something that should not die in the vine. It's very important. Unfortunately, it could happen in your service. You don't want it to. But this is one way to ensure that one generation never forgets another, and we maintain that veteran connection by bringing in next generation. And that's very much part of TerraSearch. Very much part of TerraSearch.
And how can people contact you to get involved with this?
We have a website. We have a contact portal. We are on Facebook and LinkedIn, and they can always reach out to me as well. We be a nonprofit, of course, we have to fundraise every so often. We will need to get into that. The main way is through the website or our social media page. And come on. We are getting a lot of interest. So much so that I'm trying to turn this into getting the Department of Defense to pay attention to the fact that we can do way more than right now they're asking of us. We really could.
Well, I'll put the links that I can find to the description. So if you're listening this on YouTube, click on one of the links under the video to get more information about this project. Well, thank you, PJ, for what you're doing, for things that you shared today. A lot of very interesting stories and a lot of very important things that you're doing.
Okay, brother. Thank you so much for checking in. And you guys are welcome aboard anytime. We'll let you know when we're going out.
Absolutely.